Once again, the leaders and best are trendsetters. Welcome everybody to Michigan Football at the Voice of College Football. I am one of your post-game hosts, Desmond. I've got my partner Dre here with me, and we have the man himself, Mark Rogers, with us as well. Before we get started, please like and subscribe the video, share it on social media. We definitely appreciate it. We like to get to your questions while we are chatting. Also, while you're at it, follow Mark's main channel, The Voice of College Football. He is constantly streaming. If there's a time of the day or night that is available, Mark is on, putting out some great content, and we definitely appreciate him having us. So, gentlemen, how we doing? Dre, how's it going, my friend?
It's going good, going good. This is one of my sports-wise, my favorite time of the year. I'm sure for our fellow, watchers as well. The tournament time, Thursday and Friday are what is it, the most unproductive days of the year work-wise, because we have games that start as early as 12 o'clock, and they go to I think almost midnight if you count like the games on the West Coast. So that goes all the way into through the weekend. So excited for that, just as a sports fan. And I'm not huge into college basketball. Like, I'm not watching it in the regular season as much, but I love this time of the year. And yeah, it should be fun.
Dude, Mark, how about yourself?
Yeah, it's fun. It is a fun time. It's always been something that I look forward to. I got to admit, not so much in recent years. I got to admit that I never thought that there would come a day in which Thursday at noon would come, meaning Thursday, the tournament opener, and I was completely oblivious to it. But that's what's happened maybe the last 5 years, where I didn't even know until if there wasn't social media, I wouldn't have known that the tournament started. But I'll try to revert back to, what I was for forever, 30 years. I don't know. I couldn't wait for the tournament. Had it all planned out. Okay, got a noon start, then we got a 12:15 start, then we got a 12:40 start, and it is awesome.
Well, I would imagine at your previous stop that it probably was a huge deal work-wise.
Yeah. So obviously anything going on with sports, if you work at ESPN, even if you don't have the rights to it, you're still got to be all over it with all the studio shows and everything else going on. What was really odd was the first year I worked at ESPN, of course, CBS has had the tournament forever. And then all their little sub networks, people actually find out this time of year what true TV is and where to find it.
Right. Absolutely.
What is this? Oh yeah, I got to figure out where this is. But the first year I worked at ESPN was just a couple months after. So this would have been 6 months after 9/11, and the war had started in Iraq, and we were the backup for CBS. So at any second, they could ditch the entire tournament, and we'd have to take it over. And we'd have to have everything in place just like we had everything. And that happened. They handed the tournament to ESPN at some point, and that's been so long ago, 20 years ago, 21 years ago, whatever, that I forget at what point on, I think it was opening weekend. I don't think we had it past then. They took over the regionals after that. But they dumped it on us, and that was a whirlwind. And at that point, being in the door for 3 months or 4 months, I certainly wasn't the mastermind of how to figure out everything. I was just kind of playing along and still training and all that. So that was one of my professional memories of the men's tournament. Besides, well, you know what? It reminded me of this day in 1998. So somebody posted on Twitter, and I'm sure a million people actually posted on Twitter, Bryce Drew's shot against Ole Miss for Valpo. And I saw that on Twitter a couple hours ago where, this is one of the iconic shots of all time, the Bryce Drew shot. And actually, I was covering that game, and I was in the media row, like right behind the coaches and players.
Wow.
when that pass was thrown like baseline, like right to my right in front of me, and I was covering Ole Miss and their NCAA run at that point. So I was at the game, and it was pretty crazy.
That would be great to experience one day, which is a live, um, March Madness game. I keep trying to get Desmond to commit to and people, by all means, if you've done this, please let us know. To commit to a weekend trip for March Madness, but he just refuses. He wants to be frugal, so that's okay. And
That's part of it. That's part
if
of it.
frugal is the wrong word, then it's
No, that's
really
the right
smart.
word. That's
the
the
right
nice.
word.
Well, some people just call it cheap. Like, you're being cheap. Frugal's the nice way to say that.
Right. But anyway, I'm gonna eventually get him to go. It may be 10, 15 years from now, but I'm eventually get him to commit to it, and we might even do this show from there. Who knows? You
That'd
never
be
know.
awesome.
So
There we go.
yeah.
There we go.
Hey, taking it national, baby. Um,
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, I think it would be cool. I think it would be fun. I think it would also be an enormous amount of people. In my mind, the way I picture it is because I've been to Vegas like maybe once for a work trip, and it was during the week, and there were obviously a ton of people, and it was basically work paid for everything. So we stayed at like the Cosmo. A lot of people there for folks who haven't been to Vegas. A lot of people there, but my thought of it is it would be just constant people no matter where you went. Like you couldn't find a bar where you could just relax, kind of have your beer, root beer, whatever your drink of choice is, and be able to watch the game. I'd imagine it being just wall to wall people. And that is just the opposite environment that I want to be in when I'm watching sports. I'm good with, busy places, but I just the wall to wall, like it's crazy just to get in. That does not sound exciting to me at all. But I also haven't been there during March Madness, so it may be totally not what I'm thinking, and I just am overthinking it.
Yeah.
I was in Vegas on Final Four weekend about 5 years ago. It was the Villanova, North Carolina final.
Oh,
And
okay.
my friend and I were in Vegas.
Oh, that's a game
that
winning
weekend.
shot. Yeah, game winning shot.
Game-winning
at the
shot.
buzzer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a little interesting watching it at a sports book. That was a one-time experience. And then in terms of a whirlwind, what comes to mind, well, I was on spring break a few times during March Madness and watching, games in crowded places. But 2 years before the Bryce Drew shot, so in '96, I was fortunate enough that I was covering Mississippi State, not Ole Miss, because Mississippi State made the tournament that year. And on consecutive weekends, we went from covering the SEC championship in New Orleans. They beat Kentucky in the SEC championship game. And then, we had like a day or two to plan everything out. Their first stop was in Indianapolis. We went to Indianapolis. They won the 2 games in Indianapolis that weekend, which was also, I got to see the Tyus Edney Missouri coast to coast against UCLA. UCLA was the defending champ, and Tyus Edney knocked him out. But I was there covering Mississippi State, but they were in the same bracket. So we went to Indianapolis the first weekend. They won the 2 games, and this was unexpected. They were a 5 seed. They were supposed to do okay, but we didn't expect this to happen. So for them, number one, to beat Kentucky, who eventually won the national championship, but Mississippi State beat them in the SEC tournament, then go to Indianapolis the next weekend, see them win 2 games. Then they went to Lexington the next weekend, so we went to Lexington. So we'd come back like late Sunday night, get our things together, wash clothes, pack back up, because press conferences would start like Tuesday or Wednesday, get back. It was always funny. They would have kind of like a showcase practice for everyone at these sites. It wasn't a real practice, but it was for the media to, get video and get interviews and everything. But so their next round was a pretty interesting regional, because it was at Rupp Arena in Lexington, and they beat Cincinnati with Danny Fortson. They were the 1 seed. They might have been the 2. Then they beat Ray Allen and UConn in the regional final to go to the Final Four, and they were the 1 seed. I think UConn was the 1 seed with Ray Allen. Then they went to the Final Four. We went to New York. They played at the Meadowlands that year, and they were so hot, beating Cincinnati, UConn, and but then they laid an egg in the Final Four, lost to Syracuse by 12 or 14 points, something like that.
Oh yeah, that's laying an egg in the Final Four. You lose by a couple digits, that's laying an egg. Well, it's just the fun part of this year. But gentlemen, I need you to tell me if this is an overreaction or not overreaction, but am I reading too much into this, or is it something? Being on the good old Twitter, I saw that Eric Gall, tight end from the University of Michigan, probably going to be NFL, legitimate NFL prospect where he's taking next year's draft or whatever it is. We'll see. He tweeted, "Love my quarterback, Cade McNamara," and for a second, it got me thinking. I thought, how much support does Cade have versus JJ? Because and when I say, when I bring that up, I'm not saying there's some kind of divide in terms of guys actually liking one guy and disliking the other. But, like, hey, K's my guy. This is who I prefer. This is how I won't throw him into football. Nothing personal against JJ, but that's what I prefer. Same thing, vice versa, right? I prefer JJ throwing me into football as opposed to Cade for whatever player that is on the roster. How much of a impact do you think that has into the coaching decision? I mean, think about this. Cade has the cachet. He's taking these guys to places they've never been before. So we on the outside, all of us have automatically assumed before JJ's injury that he was logically next in line, but maybe Cade, even without JJ's injury, had more of a reign on his starting job than we probably even thought.
Yeah, I think Jim Harbaugh's track record says that Cade had the QB1 spot until unseated. That now I say that, and with the caveat of he hasn't had a 5-star quarterback that he has recruited that has been on campus. So that may have changed things a little bit, but I mean, I don't think that the players up to this point have much influence on that decision, just because number one, the injury, like the injury takes this out of the equation. Like there is no battle right now in spring ball. It's Cade getting reps. So that part's taken out of it. And I just think, I think with the way that Jim typically operates is that he's big. He said it multiple times that this, it's a merit-based, the way he operates. It's merit-based. What have you done? And you're the returning starter as a quarterback. Okay, well, I'm not even going to bring someone else in to try to have a battle. Like you have the spot until you don't have the spot. And he just hasn't shown that. I mean, we've seen, Shea Patterson, who was a highly recruited transfer quarterback, come in, have long stretches of football where he struggles and doesn't play well, solid, but definitely not a 4 or 5-star caliber performance that you assumed he was going to have. And there was never any debate on Shea Patterson not being the starting quarterback. There was no, there was really no shot. I mean, even Milton, I'm trying to think of when he, when we ended up seeing Cade, I think that was injury based, wasn't it? I think Joe Milton got nicked up.
Joe, he was just that bad. He was that bad. It was a Rutgers game, and it got to the point where his play literally he forced the hand of remember.
But the last thing I'll say with that is, I'll kick it to you. But the last thing I'll say is with that though, Joe Milton also wasn't a returning starting quarterback either. That was year one. So that's where I land on that. What about you, Mark?
No, I think it's a great thing that it's a great point that Dre brings up, speculating on this tweet, because either Eric All is just kind of commenting without giving it a whole lot of thought to, okay, how could this be read into? He's just supporting his quarterback, or he's trying to make a statement. And yeah, these guys, they're not robots. They just don't go out there and, okay, we just catch and run and throw and tackle. We guys naturally gravitate to other guys in terms of whether that's a personality thing. I like my guy, or it's just a flat out assessment of, I think that dude's better than that dude, and I'd rather have him play. Or like you said, Des, he just tends to look for me more than he does. So I want him to be the quarterback. So obviously this goes on all over the place, and it doesn't necessarily divide locker rooms. Guys go out there generally and do their jobs, but I think it's obviously a different position than every other position. The best corner is going to play. The best outside linebacker is going to play. But when you get to this position, yeah, the best guy is going to play. But if it's close, then I think that very much could come into play, kind of an assessment of who's got this team, who is this locker room rooting for, who is pulling for this guy or not that guy, and who are they playing harder for.
And I give you another example, like where, and this is where you can read too much into social media, or, it could be signs of things that are going on the inside. And like, once again, do not want to create some kind of controversy. I'm just speculating, right? I remember, a couple times I saw this, right after the Georgia game, you saw, I think, Mike Morris, you saw JJ, and I believe Donovan Edwards, taking a picture together, staying on the field, watching the Georgia celebration. And then not too long ago, I saw a picture of Donovan Edwards, Cade McNamara, and I believe Andrew Anthony, all three together. And the caption was, "We want to win a national title." And as you know, all three of those guys are young, their first time playing last year. So also you got to think about, the class that these guys are in, how, you naturally kind of bond with guys you come into the program with, right? And you kind of grow up together, if you will. And I do think that's interesting, what do you do as a coaching staff where if you believe Donovan Edwards is a Heisman Trophy candidate, right? Like, this guy is special. Do you factor in that, man, him and JJ have great chemistry? Him and Kate are work good together, but wow, JJ takes Donovan Edwards' game to another level just based on the chemistry and rhythm on the field, right? Rather it's because they just put in so much more work together, off the field, and their clothes, like, that factors in. I mean, think about an NFL. One of the things that we heard Matthew Stafford, the great Matthew Stafford, say after their Super Bowl win was that, him and Cooper Kupp, from day one were working together so much, in the off season, working on their routes, working on situational football, and it absolutely carried over. And it was to the point where even when the defense knew that Cooper Kupp was getting the ball, him and Stafford had such a connection that it didn't matter. So when you're in a coaching staff, as a coach, you're seeing that, you're watching practice, and you're seeing, obviously, you're having JJ get his reps, having K get his reps. You're like, man, in this hypothetical situation, JJ is really connected with Andrew Anthony. He's really connecting with Donovan Edwards. You got to think about that when in terms of, like, okay, who should I play? On the other end, you have a guy like Cade, who's a veteran, who is battle tested, and who is now has success. And you're like, well, he probably does have majority of the locker room's approval, but does he have the overall approval of my best and most talented players? So in terms of who they prefer. So those are the type of things I think about, and how does that factor in? Of course, injury aside for JJ.
Yeah, I think, well, I think part of what should factor into the decision, not all of it. I think it should be, I think a lot should factor into the decision, but you have to think of the chemistry with Ronnie Bell and Cornelius Johnson, because, Ronnie Bell is a guy that, everyone thought was going to have a really good year last year, had an injury early on and missed basically the whole year. To get to that next level and not only get to the college football playoff, but we're talking win a national championship, you're going to have some form of an explosive pass game. Like I think we can all agree on that. Now, whether you need that or not to win the Big Ten, that is up for debate because essentially we watched Michigan, early on in the season just be a run heavy team, and they started to open up more and more, down the line as far as the season went on. But when you ended up squaring up against Georgia, and granted that's the national championship, they pretty much put it to everybody outside of the SEC championship. You saw that Michigan in that game was not on Georgia's level, regardless of how you feel about it. Just in that game, they weren't on that level. And I think an explosive pass game changes things because you look at the only loss that Georgia had against Alabama, it was an explosive pass game that got them there. It was the ability to come out and hit a 50-yard, 60-yard touchdown that changes a lot. And we saw Michigan do that at times last year, but to be able to consistently do that to where you've got a defense that all the time has to worry about potentially a guy running by them and the ball getting thrown over their heads, that changes a lot of things. So that's something that I think you should at least look at a little bit. That shouldn't be the entirety of the quarterback decision of the chemistry with these two guys, but I think I think it should factor in somewhat. So we'll see what happens as far as what does factor into it, but I truly think that with JJ's injury of spring ball, because you look at the spring, like guys develop so much in the spring, and for JJ to not be able to have this spring, I really don't see how JJ can come in and unseat Cade, because essentially what's happening is I'm QB1 all through spring without any competition at all. And we're in, let's say JJ could start throwing in August, or in August he's back to normal. I mean, that's still going to be incredibly difficult for 2 weeks of training camp for Cade to somehow just fall apart, and JJ is, I just don't. If we're talking realistically, like we see what Cade is made of, and we've seen it. Right, he went through adversity, and every game didn't go perfect, and he had mistakes, things like that, and that dude is tough. So I don't see that happening, and to me, I just don't see how JJ will be able to unseat him in 2 weeks of football. I just don't see it.
I think the interesting situation will come into play is, what if Michigan drops a couple of games? Once they get through the cupcake part of the schedule, which is like the first 4 games, which is essentially like you can combine all 4 of those teams and line them up, and they still will win the game. My goodness, like what happens if Michigan gets to starts off 4-0, drops 2 out of their next 3, and they're at 5-3, right? What happens in that situation? Do you at that point in time where it may look like at 5-3 that when the Big Ten's out of the question, you would think get to playoff is definitely out of question. Do you flip over the office to JJ? I just feel like as good as, and it's not his fault, man. It really isn't, and it's not to knock Cade. I just still feel like he's on borrowed time, and he's just trying to, he's like a mouse being chased by the cat, and he's barely staying ahead. He's barely staying ahead, and one slip up, and it's like game over. And, by all means, this injury to JJ definitely gave him a few steps ahead, right? But I just feel like once the fall starts, once JJ's back 100%, and if the season starts to go a little bit off the rails, and K could be playing like he played last year, the safe game manager, but the team it's going through that development process where they've had some turnover and guys trying to figure their way out. We know the defense, we are anticipating the defense to take a step back, at least initially. So that causes them to drop a couple games mid-season, right? That's where I could see like, all right, JJ takes over. And that's just how I feel. It may be wrong, but I just feel like, Cade is just barely, he's barely clinging on to that job, man. I really do.
Mark, what say you?
I think if they drop a couple games and J.J. McCarthy's healthy, I think that rewrites things. Like if they're out of the Big Ten championship race, but if they have another season that's similar to this one, which the season they just had was a remarkable season by all accounts, but now that's been accomplished. So Michigan fans are going to be more like a little less, ecstatic about beating Ohio State, winning the Big Ten. That's
I
still a
won't say
great
that.
accomplishment.
Oh no, I will be ecstatic
No?
about
Okay.
beating Ohio
Okay.
State.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Um,
Sorry.
yeah. Well, you're the best one to speak on it because I'm talking to the guy here that represents the Michigan fan base here. So I just threw that out as speculation. It's obviously not going to be as big a deal, meaning that if you've got a quarterback who you do not believe to be as good as the backup quarterback from a talent perspective, but he is continuing to win. You played a team in the college football playoff where basically the same thing was happening, where there was a quarterback in Stetson Bennett that it seemed, based on the feedback that I hear on our channels and the comments coming back, it seemed like 80% of the Georgia fan base wanted him out of there just constantly from week to week throughout the season. And because they were enamored with the talent that they had in the room. But there was no obvious place or time to pull Stetson Bennett. There has been no obvious place to pull Cade McNamara. He just pulled off with the help of a tremendous team around him. It wasn't like a one-man show, but he was the leader on offense for a team that accomplished what it had not in 17 years, winning the Big Ten championship. So it's going to take poor play, I guess, combined with a loss or two at least, that's going to cause this thing to turn in JJ's direction, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is, and obviously I'm speaking for myself. I can't speak for everyone, but I think it's like that little bit of an anxiety that I have as a Michigan fan that, we had this supposedly 5-star kid, and I think there's legitimacy to that. I've seen enough of JJ to see like, okay, this kid's very, very talented. He's very talented.
I get it.
Yeah, and it's like the anxiety of like, man, the way the landscape of college football is today. I know he loves to hear he made bleed amazing blue. I don't want to lose this kid. Don't want to lose this kid. And I think that like no matter what Cade does, in a way, it's like always in the back of your mind, like, man, I don't want, let's say Michigan finishes this year's 8-4, 9-3. Let's say 9-3. I think that's a very respectable year after losing what they lost this past offseason, right? And I even say they beat Ohio State. They go 9-3 and they beat Ohio State. I think most Michigan fans would take that like, oh, this is great. Okay, I like this. Now, this is a 9-win season that I can accept and move forward with, right? But JJ decides to leave. Cade plays all the year, but JJ decides to go. For whatever reason, doesn't want to, but Lincoln Riley calls USC and he needs him. I'm just giving you an example, right? And he's like, his family's like, no, you need to take advantage of this situation, and he just leaves. Like, that would crush me as a Michigan fan. And then I see JJ go on to the next following year win the Heisman, playing in that Lincoln Riley offense. That's the type of anxiety, and it may never happen, but that would be like the fear that I would have.
I'm the most interested in one little phrase in everything you just said, and that's that you're satisfied with a 9-3 season. So if you're representing the Michigan fan base, let's say you're obviously not representing everyone. Everyone's different with what the expectations are. So you still haven't gotten to a place where it's like, we got to get to a playoff. We got to win the Big Ten championship, or this season's not acceptable.
Well,
I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just curious.
And can you kind of broke up for a second, Mark? For me, can you repeat that?
Well, basically, so you have not gotten to a place as a Michigan fan, considering what you experienced last year and what the history of the program is and the resources and everything else, that a conference championship / playoff season is not the standard or bust, or it's a disappointment, unacceptable season.
No, I can't say I'm there, and part of it is due to that little bit of grace that Harbaugh gets for finally getting it done last year, right? I don't think that we've had the consistent results of that like an Ohio State has had, where I can expect that to be the norm going forward, right? Last year was an anomaly, so it's like, okay, wow, this is incredible, but I need to see a consistent um, uh, results like that to be like, okay, either you get there or it's a failure. Right now, that's what I would like. And by all means, I'm not saying that you can go 7-5, but I'm trying to give you some grace, understanding of, you don't have the consistency of that. You're losing guys, and you lose guys, you bring in other guys, and they're ready to go like a machine, like Ohio State has been, like Alabama has been, right? Where you can deal with that turnover, personnel, and coaching staff wise, and it doesn't really affect the overall success of the team. So I'm trying to be fair. Now, my competitive spirit expects more, but I'm trying to be fair given those factors.
Okay. Because I'm going to say something, and Des can tell me if I'm right or I'm wrong. Because you got an Alabama rep here, and you got an Ohio State rep here, and there are obvious similarities between the two, but there are some differences too. Because if Nick Saban goes 9-3 this year, Alabama fans will be stunned, shocked, disappointed, livid. The unreasonable ones will be livid and say ridiculous things about Nick Saban. But Nick Saban's in a completely different category, off by himself. He can go 9-3, obviously. He's untouchable and should be. Ryan Day has a great record at Ohio State, but he's eons away from Nick Saban. If he goes 9-3, I'm not saying Ohio State's going to fire him. I don't think they would. But if he goes 9-3, most of the fan base will want him fired.
But that's below your standard, Mark. And that's a standard that has been set, from Tressel to Meyer, So
Sure.
now he's not upholding that standard. Now I'm not like my good friend, over there, Desmond, who believes that Urban Meyer underachieved at Ohio State. That's a conversation for another day.
That'll be a good one.
Yeah. He set a stand. I mean, Urban Meyer and Tressel both won national titles, multiple Big Ten titles. Like Ryan Day has to win a national title eventually, like he does, like to uphold that standard. So if Ohio State goes, not for one, they lost to Michigan last year, right? Didn't win the Big Ten, which is a big no-no, and they go out and go 9-3 this upcoming season. Yes, he will be on the hot seat in the mind of some fans, because it's like, hold on a second, you're not doing something that these previous coaches have done. So now we have a problem. As opposed to Harbaugh, it's like, well, you just did something that we haven't seen here in Big Ten, last Big Ten I think was 2004, so that was about 18 years ago. So there's a little bit of grace because you've kind of broken through a little bit. Now let's see if you can sustain it, and then we'll see who you really are. So I think it's a totally different type situation.
Sure. Yeah, the last two Ohio State coaches did not get fired. Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel. Well, Jim Tressel got fired, but not for on-the-field issues. So the last Ohio State coach that got fired had lost 2 straight against Michigan, and he went 8-3, and he got fired. John Cooper went 8-3 and got fired, and he was only a season removed from finishing number 2 in the country.
Well, I think, and I don't think Ryan Day would be fired. I'm sure there are some Ohio State fans that would say that if they went 9-3 this year. I think the issue would be the trend for Ryan Day. And granted, I know that, just a couple years ago they were in the national championship. They had some injuries, but essentially Ohio State did not it didn't show well. It looked like there was a very big gap, the Mac Jones, Alabama year versus Justin Fields. And then you have the year of last year where you didn't win the Big Ten. You lost to, lost to Oregon, which I don't think that was, well, speaking for not an Ohio State fan, I don't think that was a huge deal because you had, first year starting quarterback. I think that was only week 2 or week 3. But then you turn around and you lose to Michigan, which, like Dre said, is a no-no. I mean, it's been what Urban Meyer had 7 straight years. Ryan Day had 2 straight years. So was that 9 straight between them? And then you're the guy that breaks the streak. You never want to have that, and then to turn around and go 9-3 after that. It would seem as if the trend is trending down, even if that's not the case. But I think that would be the tough part with Ryan Day because I would look at this year for Ohio State and say although they are losing a lot, especially the offensive weapons, you're talking about a Heisman finalist who's a returning starting quarterback, and you've got a receiver who just broke historic Rose Bowl records coming back as well. Like I get it, that's only 2 people, but also too, yeah. So there's plenty there where you could point to and say, I mean, even if your offense isn't clicking, having C.J. Stroud, Smith and Jigba, and Henderson, that's enough to win 90% of Big Ten games. Like just leaning on those 3 guys, and also with the Ohio State roster around them, that's enough to win you 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 Big Ten games. So really you have to get up for Michigan, your rival, which Ohio State has traditionally done. So I think that would be the tough part for Day. I think he'd be fine. I think he's a really good coach. But it's a what have you done for me lately type of sport. And if it's not, if it's not that standard that you're used to, then you've got the crazy fans who want him fired. So,
well, it's because it's because it gets personal for fans. College football, more than professional football, it's a lot more emotional connection for fans. And when you have emotions involved, as you know, in a personal life, business, whatever it is, any kind of relationship, you tend to can sometimes not be completely rational with your decision making, how you view things at times, and your perception of things. And I think that definitely plays in this hypothetical situation with Ohio State if they have a down year like that. And look, I think overall, what you're seeing with Ohio State, what will be interesting to see is that look, they're always going to recruit well, right? The question will be, does the Ohio State fan base, for one, get the results they're looking for, but 2, do they like the stamp of what Ohio State football is as of today? Like, do they like the way that the defenses ran? Do they like the way that Ryan Day calls his offense? Is he passing too much? Is he not running enough? Whatever it is, those, because the longer and longer his tenure goes, the more of his stamp on the program becomes more apparent, right? It's no longer Urban Meyer's program that he's taking over. It's purely his program, right? And one thing that one consistent talking point that I heard from Ohio State fans was the quote unquote softness that they displayed in the Michigan game, right? How Michigan was able to do, which they haven't done in a very long time, dominate them up front, right? The lack of the ability to tackle guys, right? I think those are the type of things that will cause a fan base to sour because they feel like that falls directly on coaching, right? And it goes against the brand of football that they're used to. So I think that's also something to watch with, Ohio State going forward. You can't have your linebackers looking as bad this upcoming year as they did this past year, right? So those are things I think about.
There's a comment on the screen, I think, that's interesting out of our guy Ferris. I don't know where Ferris came from, but he's been
Our last couple, he's been
man.
here and commenting a lot.
He's
Thank
been
you.
here.
Appreciate it.
He's been on pretty much every show I've done for the last few weeks. So Ferris, we appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. So Ferris is going to stick up for the Maize and Blue, and that's great. I appreciate that as a Michigan fan. So he's asking, does Ohio State have a winning record over Michigan? So I'm assuming he means all time. Oh, I'm looking at the record right now just to make sure I didn't miss by one game.
Don't do that,
I
Ferris.
knew I would get it just about exact by myself, but I just want to make sure. 59-51 Michigan. Okay, that's the all-time series. And they must have a winning
just
record.
do the last 20 years, Mark. You don't have to do that. Look, I'm not trying to get mad at Ferris. I'm not. Just like I could care less. I mean, it's not relevant.
That was going to be my point. Is that I don't have an issue with a Michigan fan or any fan. We can take this to all sorts of different rivalry arguments that say we've got the all-time series record. I don't care if we've lost 12. I'm sure they care if they've lost 12 consecutive games, but they want to hold on to. We got a 59-51 lead, and I don't have an issue with that. That's an argument point. Is that the end-all, be-all in everything? I don't think so, but it's a strong argument point. But we're talking about games that were played in before 1900.
Right.
So, I was doing some quick math here since Woody Hayes, and it's pretty decided in Ohio State's favor. And we're going back 70 years. So we're not talking like the last 10 years. We're talking 70 years in Ohio State's favor. So do you care more about that? Do you care about 59-51?
Look, when you if the bulk of your success against a program is before they were face masks on the helmets and guys are wearing like leather, like whatever there were on their heads, and
you taught those teams how to play football before you played them.
I just and Ferris, once again, I really do appreciate you being here, and by all means keep commenting. It's not you. You just kind of you triggered something that I tend to just get very annoyed with, which is especially before this year, Michigan fans tend to lean more on history as opposed to what's going on currently, right? Because it's easier. Look, factually speaking, Michigan is the
winningest program
ever, right? So you can lean on that and lean on that and lean on that. And most likely, unless they completely fall off a cliff and start averaging three wins a year, they're probably going to keep that for a very, very long time because they're going to continue to just slightly outpace even the best teams, right? So you're going to always be able to lean on that. But it's just,
I guess I'm just not sure that's the mic drop that Ferris intended it to be.
No, you know what a mic drop is? Hey, what's the Ohio State Michigan record out of the last 20 years? What is it? Probably 17-3. That's a real mic drop. So it's like, because if I tried to do that as a Michigan fan and an Ohio State fan did that to me, I would be speechless. Like, what can I say?
Right. Yeah, but it's been 1,000 days or whatever it was since Ohio State's beat Michigan, and you could go with that. I see that on Twitter a lot, so you could go to that,
and that's all fun. And that's all fun. I'm good with that. Look, when you win, and I'm all for it. Look, I trash talk Ohio State fans too, but I know where to stay in my lane, right? Before I start to bridge the gap between poking fun at you because we beat you, compared to like trying to make to seem like we're dominating this series, because the facts of the matter is it's just we're not, and we have to continue to prove ourselves. I think Michigan has to prove themselves again in this rivalry and really establish themselves as a credible threat. Look, I don't care what Ohio State says. They can put Michigan on that clock in the weight room and wait for the game every year. But the truth is, we have not been on their level when you look at the last 20 years. They have dominated us. We are the program that's trying to reestablish our brand in this rivalry, right? We are the ones that should always have a chip on our shoulder, right? So I just think that needs to be embraced not only by the fans, but by the players, by the coaching staff. There's no entitlement. We are trying to get to that level. It's just what it is.
For the record, Michigan's 34 ahead of Ohio State and 35 Alabama. And so, man, Alabama's on that pace of what, 13 a year, 14 a year,
Yeah.
versus 9, man. It may not last too incredibly long if this keeps up. And Ohio State's on a pretty good pace themselves. Plus, I don't know if you guys heard, you guys will, Dre, probably roll your eyes at this. The Ohio legislature is after the NCAA. They are like pushing hard to get the 12 wins back from the 2010 team that went 12-1 and had those vacated by the NCAA because of the tattoo scandal.
Oh, prior. Oh,
yes,
okay.
those
Look,
guys. So Ohio State may get 12 back real quick, and that'll cut it down to like 22 or so.
Wow.
Well, look, that's great. And Ferris, he said he followed up and said, "Does historical data mean anything?" Of course it does. But if you're talking about, if you're going to use historical data as some, you have to put context to that data. I think that's the most important thing,
Sure.
right? Ferris, I'll be a lot more on board with your point if, let's say, Michigan had the same record versus Ohio State, but Michigan has had the recent dominance that Ohio State has had. Then you're like, okay, wow, not only are they winning this rivalry, they've won it more consistently over the last 20 years. So they actually own it, right?
Dre, do you know any crazy Michigan fans, like unreasonable? We need to bring them on. I want to hear from them.
Oh, I don't want to. I mean, I don't want to. I'm joking.
We know of one, Dre. We know of one. We gotta. We probably should reach out and see if we can get a couple on.
I mean, here's the thing. I always say this, right? You can love your school, and by all means, I love the University of Michigan, but it doesn't mean that you turn a blind eye to reality, right? And I just think that's just how I roll with it. Like, I hate Ohio State. Like, I despise them. Why? I don't know. I'm a Michigan fan, and I grew up. That's our enemy, right? Mm-hmm. But I respect them. How can I not?
Right.
As a sports fan, how can I not? Like, because if you don't know how hard it is to do, what they have done, and I saw Rob J say, yeah, like Ohio State's won a lot of natties lately. Well, they've won one in the last 10 years. Michigan hasn't won one since 97. So, yeah. And they've also played for what? Wait, how many? Well, okay, since Michigan's won the title in national title in 97, Ohio State won it in 03 versus Miami, even though I believe that
let's not get started on that one.
Yeah.
And then they played against against Florida?
I think Miami got robbed, but whatever. I'll stay there.
I think Ohio State got robbed in that game a number of times. But anyway.
Oh, boy.
Then you have the Florida game.
I agree with people that say that was a poorly officiated game, and I say absolutely Ohio State got robbed like 3 times in that game. Anyway. They lost to LSU, Florida, and Alabama in national championship games, and then they won 2. So they've been to 5 national championship games.
And that's since 03. So that's the last 19 years. Yeah, 19 years. Mind you, Michigan has only played for one, and that was 97. Well, I said that wrong. Michigan hasn't even played for one in that time frame, right? Got close in 06. They lost the game against Ohio State to get there. But so that's what I mean. It's like, no, I'm not saying Ohio State is Alabama in terms of results, but their results are way better than Michigan's. It just is what it is. Like, it's not even close. So, you don't have to like it, but you got to tip your hat and respect it, and by all means, you have a chance to change that narrative. That's the beauty of sports.
Yep.
So I opened and talked about Michigan being a trendsetter. And I think we've got a hard stop. So I just wanted to toss this out to you, gentlemen. Michigan announced that Mimi Bolden Morris is the first female graduate assistant football coach at a Big Ten school and the first at a Power 5 FBS program. And I don't know this for sure, but I think she might be related to Mike Morris on the team.
Mike Morris' sister.
Okay, got it. I thought that was awesome. I thought it was really cool. Just, like I said, trendsetter. I thought it was awesome. Dre, what do you think about it?
And trendsetter for the right reasons. Absolutely. Look, loving the game of football, understanding the game of football, learning the game of football is not buying. It's not buying it to gender. It's all based on what you care about. So obviously, it's in her family. Her brother plays for the team, so that's pretty cool. To coach on the same team your brother is on. Um,
And think about how many, fans of football played, JV football in high school. That was the most that they've done, and think that they know better than, a Sean McVay or Ryan Day or Nick Saban. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so like you said, it doesn't. It's not based on gender. It's not based on how much you played or anything like that. Like football, I think is one of those sports where you truly just need to study it. Like if you
I love
watch
it. I
enough
love
of
it.
it and really focus on it, break it down, like more so than just a fan, like you can gain a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of free clinics and things like that on YouTube. But yeah, sorry to cut you off, but
No, but and I think look, Desmond, you have a daughter, like I think anytime we see something in a new profession where women are allowed to start to branch off into, it allows just additional doors to be opened. Look, for the next little girl out there who just loves the game of football. She's drawn to it, and now she has an example. Like, hey, you know, I'm a she could be a fan of University of Michigan. You know how powerful that is to see. Hey, well, I think she's a quarterback coach, or she's going to be assistant one
yeah, I think
quarterback.
assistant quarterbacks. Yep.
Like, wow, I could do that. I think that is so cool, man. I think that's cool, and one day it doesn't seem likely now. If someone asks us the question, but one day, whenever it is, 20, 15, 30 years, 40 years from now, whenever it is, you might see a woman being a head coach of a football team, right? And the overall point is that good for Michigan being a trendsetter, and I wish that young lady the best. It's-
Only thing I'll say about that is that obviously in this country for decades and decades and decades and beyond, uh, people were wrongfully excluded based on ethnicity. I'm speaking to both of you. Obviously, you know better than I, and or gender, and that's horrible. And I know that there have been actions made by some organizations and institutions in the last several years, couple decades, to maybe right those wrongs unfairly, lifting certain people up, and I've seen that happen. Um, I want us to arrive at a place, and hopefully we have, where the gender, the race, none of those things are taken into consideration, and just the qualifications of the individual are considered, and the best person is
Just a job.
awarded the job or the opportunity.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
this looks to be an example of that. So that's awesome.
I mean, wasn't it? Was it 2 years ago? I think it was the the girl who kicked for Vanderbilt, if I
Yeah,
want to say.
Yeah, Sarah Fuller.
I'm
Ooh,
not sure
that
of her
sounds
name.
right.
I just remember. I
I
remember
follow her
that.
on Twitter. But
Um, and that's pretty cool. And I remember thinking, like, if you really think about it, kicking a football, it takes a huge amount of leg strength, but why has it why hasn't there been more women at least playing kicker or punter? Because I'm just saying, like, the nature of you know the game, and you would think, like, like, because if you got a leg, you got a leg.
right,
And if
and
I was
former
a coach,
soccer player too. That definitely helps
exactly.
quite a bit.
Exactly. If I was a coach, I'm like, think about if you were a coach, right? And you're having tryouts, you're trying to find a kicker, especially like in high school or something like that. And a young lady walks out there and she kicks a 50-yarder. I'm like, you're good. I need you to suit up because I'm going to need you. It's just funny when you think about it. Um,
For
so
sure.
yeah, and that's great to see.
Last thing I wanted to do before we wrap is I was scrolling on my Instagram, just the old posts and things like that. But one of the first videos that was posted on this channel, at that time we had 1.6 thousand, or I'm sorry, 1,600 subscribers at that point when we first, essentially joined on the channel and started doing everything. And now we're over 4,100. Last I checked. So wanted to thank everybody that has subscribed and been with us, whether you were here before, Dre and I started contributing or not, but wanted to just give our appreciation and thanks to everybody who has subscribed and who check us out on a weekly basis. So appreciate you all. Thank you so much for coming in. Thanks for commenting, liking, subscribing. We appreciate all of it.
Absolutely.
Dre, what you got?
No, guys. I mean, look, I said it before. If hopefully you guys are watching March Madness. I mean, I know I will be throughout the rest of the week. Have fun. Go blue.
Who you got winning it all, real quick?
Oh, I hate that question. It's so tough.
You gotta just say something.
I'm going to go with. See, it never happens. I'm gonna go with Baylor. I just love the way they play the game. I know they won it last year, and I think there hasn't been a back-to-back title winner, a tournament winner since Florida.
Florida, I think.
But with Al Horford and Joakim Noah and all the boys. But
considering the fact I've watched no college basketball, I'm just gonna go with the favorite, who I think is Gonzaga. So even though they never seem to actually win it, I'm just gonna throw it out there.
They play all the time, but
I haven't watched anything. Well, I think they play in a weak conference and they just don't get that exposure. They play a couple teams, but so we'll see. But that is it for us. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. And that is it for us.
Peace.